Welcome to the Equity Blueprint Podcast. My name is Dana Wilson, CEO and founder of CHIP, which stands for Changing How Individuals Prosper. And our goal is to help you find financial professionals who can suit your individual needs. I started this podcast to normalize a conversation around money and wealth and what that really means to our communities and just the evolution of our lives. Money isn't always the sexiest topic or fun topic to talk about, but hey, that's why you're here. To not just learn more, but really kick back, relax, and hear other people's journeys and how they've used money, how they related to generational wealth or wealth building to become their own, what I like to call financial architects of their lives. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the dope conversations that you're about to hear with people that inspire me from all across the world. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Equity Blueprint Podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. Definitely appreciate you tuning in. My name is Dana Wilson, CEO and founder of CHIP, which stands for Changing How Individuals Prosper. And we help you build out and scale your human capital financial team. And I think it's amazing that we're probably going to touch on a lot around social capital and human capital with our next guest, who I'm excited to bring on. I feel like there should be some cheers in the background. I keep saying I got to work on my background noises, but what's up, Harold? Welcome to the Equity Blueprint Podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here. Excited.
Excited to have you on. Really excited for our conversation. Have so many things that I know that you're going to drop so many gems in a lot of different areas. But of course, make sure you tell everybody who you are and how dope you are and all the things that you're building in this world.
Sure. Well, definitely excited to be here. I think that one of the things I've learned is that we are the stories we tell ourselves. And so I'm trying to be more intentional about sharing a little bit about my story to help someone learn something they may not have known or may not have believed. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I spent about a decade in corporate America, learning the game, as I like to say it. Then I spent the next decade building a startup, being a player in the game and getting my bumps and bruises. And now leading Infinite Capital to help folks understand what's going on behind the scenes, maybe learning some of those rules they didn't quite tell you about in the game. And so as a startup entrepreneur, angel investor, author, I like to overall say I'm a social capitalist, because without people, without relationships, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this. And on top of that, when I have some spare time, I get to be a dad, and it's been, great to have the kiddos. And so, yeah, glad to be here.
Awesome. All the things. I'm just all the drip is dripping with all of the accolades and all the stuff that you've got going on.
All of it.
Love it. So I love to kick this off really talking about your personal money story and kind of what that evolution has been in the different stages of your, all the different lives that you've been living in parts of your career and also your personal life. So what was that first interaction with money for you as you remember it? And how do you think it's evolved over time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a first generation American. My family's Jamaican. And so growing up, despite what my friends or kids I grew up with would think, I was basically raised in Kingston, Jamaica, but in South Carolina. So I was born in New York City, but I was raised in Columbia, South Carolina. And so my dad dropped out of high school and became an electrician, helped provide for his family. My mom finished high school, and so everything from a caretaker to working at Rich's back before it was Macy's. Was our primary caregiver, along with my grandmother and grandfather, who all lived with me and my 4 siblings. And so when it came to cash, my parents did all they could to make sure we had the things that we needed, and occasionally could get some of the stuff that we wanted. And so for me, I understood at a young age that if I wanted certain things that were beyond that, I would need to go and create. I would need to go and become a bit of a contributor. And that's what I did. I remembered working at a young age and refereeing soccer games. And then it was working at Schlotsky's Deli, and then Rack Room Shoes and Garrett's Grill and Grog, this pub. And
I was shout out to Rack Room Shoes.
Shout out to Rack Room Shoes.
Listen, people, if you don't know, you just did not know.
Listen, I had some powder blue Tims that I got from Rack Room. They put me on. I had them with a fake Coogee sweater that I used to rock. It was a fit. But even working all that stuff, that was in high school, and then getting to college and figuring out how to put myself through college. And so I worked at Radio Shack. A lot of people listening may know Radio Shack, but 10 years, people might not remember it at all.
Oh
But
my
Radio
goodness.
Shack is where I had an opportunity to think about problem solving and thinking about how I contributed using technology to help someone solve a problem. And so I've always known myself to be a person who wanted to try and find a way to work through financial distress and trying to create opportunities for myself and for others. Even when I got my first job out of college, they offered me $28,000, and I negotiated to get to 30, and realized very quickly like this isn't going to be enough money. And so I worked at a call center in the nights and weekends as well. So when it came to the various parts of my financial career and experience, it's been thinking through, how do I do a little bit more to get a little bit more so that I can have a little bit more.
No, I love it. God, you brought back so many memories. I'm like, as a kid growing up in Jersey, I'm like Radio Shack. We just used to walk in there just to look at all the gadgets. I'm like,
Craziness.
I feel like there needs to be some disclaimers at the bottom. Radio Shack was
Definitions. Yes.
the definitions
for sure.
It's like Blockbuster. Those things, they did exist at one point.
Indeed.
But no, what I really heard you say was the word contributor, and I liked how you used that and phrased it. Especially you talked about really the legacy that you live with your parents and your grandparents and your family. What does that word mean to you now when you think about the word contributor?
Yeah, ultimately, I think that we have to acknowledge the various roles that everyone plays in the household. My wife is a key contributor as she thinks through, the kids getting them to school and thinking through all the shots they need to have or the different appointments they need to have. And so if I'm going out and having to travel, the additional headache or stress that may put on her is something that I'm acknowledging and aware of, right? And at the same time, there's a level of contribution I make financially to where she doesn't have to worry about some of these other things. Like, will the debit card work when she swipes it? Yes. Will the lights be on? Absolutely. Is the mortgage paid? Fantastic. And so I think that when it comes to contribution, I think we oftentimes underestimate some of the non-dollar amount contributions. And so I understood, like, from a young age, the amount that my mom poured into our household and my grandmother and my siblings to make the whole thing work. And so even as I talk to different entrepreneurs and think through the entire startup ecosystem, it's all an ecosystem. And you've got different people, and you can't have everyone being a breadwinner, because if everyone's a breadwinner, who's taking care of the children? Or if everyone's doing childcare, who's bringing in the resources financially to allow some of the things? And so I always knew from a young age that it was really important to make sure you have multiple different types of contributors in the household. And I'm trying to teach my son that, trying to teach my daughter that today. So they understand, like, yeah, you may see daddy less in these ways, but this is how I'm still trying to show up for the household. And so I just know that it's a more well-rounded ecosystem and everyone's kind of contributing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, because I feel like we don't talk about that part of it too. We're always looking at, oh, so-and-so's home and so-and-so's not working. But it's like, yes, that person is working, that person is contributing.
Right.
And if you're really looking at the larger picture, there's a lot more moving parts that are going on that people may not see, because we're always equating something to some income that's always coming in, right? And there's so much more to the picture besides just that person bringing in the check, right? It's all the other things that you mentioned that if that person wasn't there would be coming out of your pocket, right? So it's always that balance of, this everything has a place in the way that you mentioned. So how do you think, as you're thinking about your family and your kids, talking about how you're, getting them into that contribution mindset, how do you as a family talk about, your finances and that journey that you want them to also be on as they become little mini contributors?
Yeah, so from a young age, we set my son up with a 529 plan. Both he and my daughter have 529 plans. They both have life insurance. They both have a savings account. And then now my son has, I guess it'd be like a children's checking account. We use Goal Setter. And so he has investments. And so he knows he owns Roblox. And then we also have some crypto accounts as well. So they each have their ENS domain names. So they have .eth addresses where they have a little bit of crypto that automatically gets purchased and put into those accounts. And so from a capital standpoint, we try to help them know, like, there are lots of different types of capital that you should be aware of. one of which, chief among them, is relationships and social capital. And so how you treat people allows, how you treat mommy is going to help decide whether or not you get dessert. How you treat daddy is going to decide whether or not we get to go to the sports game on the weekend, right? So that matters. But then as you think through the way in which they can contribute, it's like, hey, listen, I would like for you to take the trash. I would like for you to do this, because that allows all of these different things to work from an ecosystem standpoint. But then when it comes down to money, it is interesting, right? Because if you're telling them like, hey, you have this money, this is your money, but they can't spend it on certain things, like that's got to be pretty frustrating. And so being able to help them say, okay, cool. One of the cool things about Goal Setter, they have these different buckets in there. It's like, okay, you've got your education bucket, you've got a fun fund. If you spend all your money out of your fun fund, you can't spend it anymore. There's nothing else there. And so being able to say, well, Dad, can I borrow some money from this or this or this? It's like, well, if you take money from that, it's going to impact you in these ways. It's like, well, how do I earn this money? Okay, great. Let's talk about that. And so those are the conversations we're having at a young age, which is really different from when I was growing up. I have no idea how much my parents made. I remember we were doing the FAFSA and I was trying to fill it out. And I was asking my dad, I was like, hey, I need to know this. And he's like, I'm not telling any kids how much I make. So definitely trying to change some things that, we learned growing up and can be a little bit different now. And it's been pretty good so far.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a different dynamic of like, no, mind your business. Just give me the form. I'll fill it out,
Right.
and then I'll send it in or whatever it is. It's like the conversations are much more expansive, especially now that kids just have access, to that digitized money. And I was actually talking about this not too long ago on a different episode where we talked about that digitization of money and the fact that, when we were growing up, we were always hand holding, like we had money in our pocket. So it was that visualization of when you went to the corner store and you had a dollar or two and you were getting whatever you were getting, and it was visually just gone. Like the pockets, there was nothing left in there. What do you think the difference is too between kind of the way we grew up with that, like more hand holding of money, having it more tangible versus like how it's digitized? And do you think there's a difference there that you see even within what you probably, remember, and then how your kids sort of equate to just that fast swiping? I'm always curious about that.
Well, I think that because of how we grew up, we like physically held dollars and cents, and we only saw that number decline, right? And so because it's digital, they're able to see the number go up. And so when you think about interest in an interest yielding savings account like we have with Goal Setter, or when you think about how much stock prices fluctuate, he can look and say, oh, well, Roblox was worth this and now it's worth this. Or when he thinks about how cryptocurrencies are moving, whether he owns Bitcoin or Solana or Ethereum, he can see how that goes. And so I think that's one of the biggest differences. That's a great question. That as a kid, he gets to see, like, if I leave my money into these types of places, it can actually increase without me doing anything. That's amazing. And so if you take away from the principal, it's going to grow at a slower rate. So make sure that what you're getting is going to provide not just the immediate value, but you're going to lose out on the future value of what it would be growing on. I think that's a huge difference from what we experience as kids, because if you start off with $10 in your pocket, you're not coming back with any more than $10. And so that's a little bit different from your traditional piggy banks back then.
Yeah, that's definitely a fact too, because it's like being able to see those increases allows for more expansive conversations earlier on, and also more market type conversations, right? With these different types of accounts, at Goal Setter, where you can see, hey, this is what you have, this is the interest that you're making, which I feel like, we didn't really have a lot of those interest bearing conversations and, talking about compounding. And now you've got kids really understanding, and not just understanding it, but seeing the power of just, hey, well, maybe I will just, leave it here another month or two, or maybe I don't really need, that thing that I wanted so bad, because they start to really understand, and, they're more excited about owning bits of Roblox, which is also equally as important.
Right.
I would probably say.
Well, that's the thing that I've seen, especially with my son, is that he's now able to set financial goals. And he's like, okay, I want to have this Fortnite membership and it's going to cost $12 per month. It's like, okay, can you make $12 a month? How would you do that? And he's like, well, if I leave this much in this account, it can make $12 a month in interest. Or if I need to go, do something for my aunt or my uncle and they'll pay me, then that helps. And so being able to know, like, if I can set a financial goal, I can use this capital. That's a huge starting point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely like sets the standard of where they can go. I mean, the sky is the limit to some degree. So, how do you feel like your relationship with money has evolved as you transition from, your corporate life to that entrepreneurial role, and now sitting in kind of this VC space, and now even with, the company that you just recently started?
I think that the biggest difference between growing up and then where I am now from a, like understanding money is thinking through how easy it is to make it. I used to think that it was hard to make money. And over the course of the last 2 years, since shutting my startup down, from thinking through moving halfway across the country with my family back to the Carolinas, and the math just should not work, right? Like God found a way to keep us, and we made enough, and
Listen,
somehow it
won't
just
he
worked.
do it? We won't turn
Won't
this into
he?
a God, but won't he do it?
Won't he? Will. Won't he? Will do it. And so that's one of the things. That's like, well, that was one of the things is that if you grow up in this mindset that you must receive handouts or you are a small cog in a big machine, you may not ever feel and say, oh, no, no, no. This experience that I have as a plumber allows me to go command my own rate now. Like think about how in demand the electrician is today, right? And so you think about these different roles where traditionally we were told like, oh, this person works for this person. It's like, no, you have true tactical knowledge that you can charge and command your own rates in some of these markets. And you just have to have the understanding and the permission, really, and maybe the optimism that, oh, I can go out and do that. And so that's one of the things I'm doing more of is saying, I've learned this. I want to make sure I'm empowering more people to think this way because there's no real reason for us to only be consumers of culture. We're creators of culture, and now monetizing it to make sure we're getting our fair, if not more, an unfair share of the returns.
No, I love that you said that because I've been talking a lot about how I feel like we've been pushed into this place where we've only ever been consumers because of,
Right.
all things in history and in reality that we all know. So it's like we're always thinking of that consumer space. How do we buy? How do we buy and then show, right? That show and tell mentality because that's all we could do. And
Right.
now it's like more of us are starting to shift our mindset first into this, oh, I can, accumulate and be the person who is having others consume from me. And it's a beautiful thing to now kind of witness more of our community be in those seats. So I definitely want to talk about, your thoughts around how we start to really leverage that social capital towards, wealth, because that's also a part of like wealth strategy too, right? The people that the good relationships that you keep, not being in rooms where you're just expecting things from people, but really showing up in that spirit of collaboration, which I'm really hoping that we continue to get to this place to of really fostering that. So how do you feel about, that social capital and how that kind of ties into people's wealth journey?
So for me, I went to college. I went to Clemson University, state school. Super excited to go there. I ended up graduating with two bachelor's degrees in economics and political science. And the economics degree, I think, is so valuable. I wish more people studied economics, but one of the things I learned through economics was understanding what specialization meant. And it is really narrowing your focus and becoming an expert in X. And because you're an expert in X, that doesn't mean you can also be an expert in Y and Z. For most people, of course, there's multi hyphenates, but the concept there is that you are so focused on specializing and becoming an expert in your one field or craft that you can't do Y and Z very well. I love that concept primarily because it encourages collaboration out the gate, right? So there's two things I try to make sure to encourage folks to do. Is that number one, please become an expert because that is what's going to make your phone ring, right? So if you become a generalist and you're pretty good at painting, you're pretty good at carpentry, you're pretty good at graphic design, you're pretty good at accounting, no one who needs something built is going to call you as a carpenter. No one who needs their numbers fixed is going to call you as an accountant. But if you are an amazing accountant, but you're a terrible cook and you don't know anything about cars, people will call you about that thing. So specialization and becoming an expert is huge. The second thing I say is that because of that, it forces you into collaboration. Really, really good at accounting, but I don't know anything about cars. It's important for me to make sure I know someone who knows something about cars. And so I think that one of my biggest superpowers is knowing what I'm not good at, because that makes me intentional about seeking out people who aren't just good, but great in those areas. And so when I was starting Bandwagon, my venture-backed tech company, that we raised $5 million to start the company, worked with brands as big as Pepsi and the NBA and all these different organizations, clients in the UAE and in Europe. Ultimately, when we were building that company, I said, hey, this whole disruption thing, we're not doing that. And so many companies, and you probably hear it all the time, people say, we're going to come and disrupt healthcare. We're going to disrupt the music industry. And I would tell my team, we're not doing that. Our goal is to complete versus compete. And so we led with collaboration. Hey, this massive company really focuses over here, but there's a $700 million a year industry or business line that they're not focused on. They can't focus on because of where their eyeball is. Let's try and focus on supporting them there. And now that I know what I know, I would have been more focused on saying, let's build $30 million, $50 million businesses, sell them to those bigger companies. And so that's something that I think we should definitely see more of, is trying to figure out complete versus compete. One of my investors told me when we were getting started, he said, beware of the collateral damage of disruption. You go in thinking you're going to take over this market. No, when you say you're going to be a disruptor, there are people who are paid multi-million-dollar bonuses to make sure you don't disrupt them. And so it puts a big target on your back. And from a community and a culture that already has a target on our back, despite the work that we do and despite all that we've overcome, I try to make sure I encourage more of us to make sure we're finding ways to collaborate instead of competing in some of those ways.
Oh yeah, I mean, collaboration is key. To your point, it's like it's the one way, it's the one driver to find success, and again, find out like what you're not good at, and also be coachable in that moment too, and not being afraid to say that I'm not good at that thing, and also be able to say, hey, I want to be around people who can help me be better, because I feel like
Right.
that's also a lot of the language that a lot of people just don't tend to use, because it's, oh yeah, I might not be good at this thing, but I don't want to tell anyone that I'm not good at this thing, and therefore I'm just going to pretend to be good at it, and then we're not really getting anywhere at all when it comes to how we start to grow and to collaborate. So it's also a part of like getting out of our own way and realizing, okay, well, who are the folks that are doing this, and how do I put myself in a position to learn, to be coached, so
Right.
that I'm receiving that information. How do you think people sort of shift their mindset to get there? Because I think a lot of people want to collaborate and they want to build that social capital, but I think sometimes they're in their own way as far as like, how do I really let people know that I'm not really good at this without feeling some kind of way about that?
I think that that is one of the biggest keys to growth, is knowing where you're strong and where you're not strong. When I was interviewing in Bandwagon, we'd be interviewing for different roles. One of the questions I'd ask, had all these really interesting, quirky questions, but one of the questions I'd ask is, when you have some free time, would you rather use that to work on your strengths and becoming, even better at things you're really good at while leaving some really glaring weaknesses? Or would you rather become focus on your weaknesses to become more of a generalist and rounding it out, but not really spending much more time on something you're good at? And we didn't hire anyone that said that they focus on their weaknesses, because we, as a small team, we needed you to be very good at this thing and to know that. And so
Right.
that
We need
level of introspection.
superstars.
Yeah, exactly. And so that level of introspection was so necessary to say, hey, I'm really good at back end dev. I don't have any eye for front end. Fantastic. Or, hey, I can do front end design, but I can't do anything on the database side. Fantastic. So that was really key. So the introspection is so good to know yourself. And the second piece of that is being open and willing to relinquish control. Because oftentimes, and unfortunately, due to like social media, we've made it to where everyone feels like their opinion matters equally. And it's because of the
Ooh, say it
feed.
for the people in the back. Good Lord.
Right. So it's because of the feed nature of this, right? To where, well, my opinion on this thing is right next to this doctor's opinion on this thing, and like they're right next to each other. Whereas decades ago, I couldn't just put whatever I thought in the newspaper and it be considered credible. And so I do think there's like a hyper focus and attention now on our opinions mattering in some way, without us doing real research. I'm in a group chat with some friends. I won't shout them out so we can keep our little private group chat. But I'm in a group chat, and it's funny because people will say like, "Oh, I've been researching this thing." You didn't research anything. You
No,
watching
we
two.
all, first of all, we all know what that means when you said you've been researching. I've got a friend group too, and I'm just like, girl,
You ain't researched this.
you know you did.
You didn't research this, like true research. You didn't research this, and so because of that, it's been important to say I am not good at this, or I don't know anything about this. And so for me, one thing I'm good at knowing when to shut the hell up. I know when my opinion doesn't make sense for me to have. You can ask me about something science related. I have no idea. I studied astronomy in college. Don't ask me about this. I have no thoughts. And so I do think the level of introspection and trusting yourself to say, "Hey, I don't know enough about this to have an opinion," is important, and being able to relinquish control. But the second thing is developing that mastery, and it's okay for, especially in the beginning, for your passion to not be the thing that you are super good at. And so I'll emphasize that more specifically. I do think it is a bit of a crime when you find out that you're really, really good at something that you don't enjoy because it's making you money and you think like, man, the whole point of this is to make money. So I need to keep doing this. That's tough. And so at the same time, just because you love something and care about it very, very much doesn't mean you should try and monetize it. And so I understand the balancing act that you have to stand between those 2 points and navigate. But ultimately, being able to say, I'm very good at this thing, I'm worth this dollar amount. And because of that, I can contribute that to a relationship, to a company, to an ecosystem. My belief is that then you can go to that ecosystem and say, hey, I'm looking for this thing, and getting to the point of bartering again. And I believe that that is something we should absolutely have more of in society.
Yeah, there's definitely a culture around everything having to be a business, right?
Yeah,
And it's just like not everything has to be a business. There are just some things that you just do, and maybe at some other point it could lead somewhere, but it doesn't have to just jump in. Oh my God, I did this thing, one person bought it, and now let's go do the LLC and let's go do the things. It's just like take a breath.
yeah,
It was it was great. Makes
great.
the main thing that you've done, you studied, you work hard for, make that the main thing because that's really the driver. And on some, twist of wherever you go, maybe there is an instance where that could be something as long as it kind of fits into the wheel and the strategy and it makes sense. But just because I don't know, put together this blanket and a few people like the blanket doesn't mean the blanket needs to be an entire company. Maybe not in this particular moment either, right? That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you can't, revisit it at some point. But in that moment, you just don't drop over here and go, all right, let's roll with the two blankets I sold that
Well,
were always half off in the first place.
exactly. And that's another challenge too, right? One of the
Mhm.
things I co-founded an accelerator with my business partner, and she's heard me say this tons of times, is that how many human beings have you talked to? Because what you'll find is that a lot of people are afraid to talk to humans because they're afraid because humans can say no. And
Mhm.
they'll tell you, I don't like this or whatever. And so here's the trick I always tell founders. I learned this last year in a meeting when I first moved to Charlotte. And the idea here is really straightforward. If you're building a company, doing any project, you don't even necessarily have to say, hey, this is what I'm doing to your friend group. Go to your friend group and say, hey, listen, met a guy, I met a woman who's doing this thing. I'm thinking about putting 10 grand into it. What do you think? And give them as much information as you have already captured for yourself. And your friend will say, don't put $10,000 in that. That's dumb. That's a terrible idea. And not to say that our friends are always right, but it is a more accurate lens than if you go and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. And your friend's like, that's awesome. Go for it. Like, congratulations. Your friend's going to go to job. They're going to go to work. They're going to get their W-2 and they're going to get their check every 2 weeks. So when it comes to entrepreneurship specifically, I do think we need to figure out a way to say, how do I stress test this to get some more balance and more insight? And everything does not have to be a business. Sometimes I could just do this thing and it's okay. Like you said, let me just make a couple of blankets every now and then.
Seriously, because if I pulled out my guitar, which I now have to restart my lessons all over again, no one's put me on a stage. And if they do, it's probably
Exactly.
going to be in front of a bunch of like 4-year-olds at their recital. But we're
Yeah,
working on that. See.
exactly.
But yeah, it's definitely, all of those moving pieces and figuring out, well, how do I build up this social capital? How do I utilize it? So from a founder's perspective, even as you're starting to grow and you found your footing there, how do you really start to accelerate that capital, right? It's one thing to maybe ask someone to be in the room, but how do you really start to transition that social capital to now revenue, or that next big thing that's going to make you scale?
For me, it has always been being very intentional with time. I think that while I am a very good multitasker, being able to demonstrate how much energy or attention you're giving to an issue, to a problem, to a person, it speaks volumes. And so if you're able to say, hey, I care very much about this industry, I care very much about this cause, you'll start to see folks who associate you with that thing and send it. A good friend of mine is working in, I guess, like environmental, clean tech, all of this stuff. So anytime I see any of this stuff, I send it to her. And it's like, okay, cool. I know this is your lane. I'm going to send it to you. And so, from a social capital standpoint, the only thing she had to do is be willing to put herself out there and say, this is what I care about. When I first started Bandwagon, I went on Facebook and said, hey, I want to tell everybody what I'm doing. This is a startup I'm working on, et cetera, et cetera. My intention was public accountability, in the same way that when you say, hey, y'all, I'm going on a diet, and 2 or 3 days later, someone's like, hey, I see you eating that cheeseburger. What happened to that diet you were on? Right. So if I tell everyone that I'm working on the startup, they'll say, hey, what happened to the little startup you're working on? So a big public accountability in that way. But then what happened, I wasn't prepared for, was my smart friends would send me articles and say, hey, did you see Ticketmaster did this? Hey, did you see StubHub's doing this? And they started to associate me with this industry. Hey, I just ran into somebody. You should meet them here. And that is what allowed me to continue to realize, like, oh man, social capital is a truly infinite resource. It compounds on itself as you step into your clearly defined lanes, as you talk about what it is you do and why it is you do it, which is why I talk about the importance of paying attention with intention. So, attention with intention. And so the emphasis there is like, oh, you start to see that. And then from there, the last thing I'll say about it is that you're able to start to really become a change maker and a gatherer of people when you say, this is what I care deeply about. And then I don't care about these other things. And so I think that that's where I've seen the most success happen, is like putting yourself out there and saying, this is what I care about. Please consider me in those ways. That's how I've seen it work the best.
So so at this point, because I feel like even though you're still kind of in this space of like building or rebuilding, and then kind of also helping people to get to this new standpoint as they start to think about social capital, um, what is your journey now with that in this moment, and how you're using the social capital that you've built to really transition that into, new relationships in the point of what you're, building in this particular moment?
So I'm really creating content. It's one of these things where, as you've seen my content, like I'm just like, okay, I've got to be willing to do this. And part of it just came from an epiphany that I had last year. So I'm turning 40 this year in November. Shout out to the Scorpios. But
I'll let you do that during Gemini season. Oh well, almost Gemini season.
almost,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll let you have that. We won't close up the podcast right there.
There you go. Last November, I turned 39, and most people try and evaluate their lives around their birthday and get a little introspective. And so I was like, let me think about the things that I care about and how can I improve. And I woke up the next day on November 28th and had landed on something, and it was it's an audacious statement, but I'll say it anyway. This is the first time I think I've shared it like publicly. Is I am tired of people who are less excellent than me getting more resources, revenue, recognition, and opportunities because they are better at promoting their mediocre work than I am about talking about the good work that I've done. Wow, for me, that was huge. And that's what I landed on. It's just like, I'm doing the hard part. The hard part is the work. And I don't want to talk about it because I feel like it'll be cringy or feel like it'll be too much, tooting my own horn. And to be clear, anyone who knows me, I'm a cheerleader. Like my friends, I'm shouting them out. I'm so excited for you. I want to help celebrate you. Your light doesn't dim mine, all that. But I also recognize like how much of that I also need to do for myself to continue to get the opportunities and stages and such that I like. And so for me, it was saying, okay, for example, I like to do my talks. I like to do keynotes and panels and all this public speaking. And so online, I'd be writing. I'd write. I put a picture that shot really well, but then also I write, paragraphs. And I remember someone saying, Harold, do you want people to pay you to speak, but you're not talking? Like they don't hear your voice. And so at that point, I was like, damn, I've got to get them to hear my voice more. So instead of writing, I would do videos. I prop the phone up. I follow Moserai, Adam Moserai, the guy who leads Instagram. And that dude will be anywhere and he'll just pop his camera up and just talk to the audience. And I think that takes such I don't know, that takes so much for me to get to that point. And part of that's probably been like weight issues that I've dealt with or just confidence issues and all that. So now that I'm moving in the right direction, all that stuff, I feel a little bit more like comfortable in my own skin. But then there's some of it where people are just like, I don't know if they care about what I have to say and this and that. It's like, that doesn't matter. You've got to push past that feeling because I can assure you there is an MWG, as I like to call a mediocre white guy, who will absolutely tell everyone that they are an expert in this field that they quote unquote researched. And you're competing with that person as well as everyone else. And so that is how I'm trying to do it, is being more intentional about sharing the journey. And so that's helped me because in that way, people message me and say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. Like I thought that, or I couldn't articulate that or whatever. And so that has helped me continue to build the social capital. And then the second thing, which I know that was a really long one. The second thing I've done to kind of think through social capital is that I'm generally a convener of people. I love to do things with people. So I'm flying to DC tomorrow and I'm going to say, hey, I'm in your city. Who wants to grab dinner? And let's get people together. Or I'm in Nashville this weekend. Who wants to do this? Oftentimes people don't like doing that. And so they stay with their little bubble. And I find that some of the best connections I've made over the last 5 or 10 years have come from me just putting myself out there and welcoming people into my life with open arms.
No, I love it because I feel like you're also talking to me too, because I'm the same way. I do a lot of speaking panels and all the things, but I haven't really done a whole lot of just open up the iPhone because for some reason I'm just like, oh God, it just feels like so much extra stuff to do. And it's really not, but to see your point, it's like something super simple and people really do want to hear your thoughts and opinions. And especially that kind of leads back to that social capital, that thought leadership, that that space of people being able to say, hey, that was a great point, or I hadn't thought about it like this, or even being able to have just those really good open debate conversations that are healthy in even changing your perspective or things that you thought, or I didn't think about it like that, and being able to have those open discussions and getting another viewpoint, which kind of goes back to learning that aggressive and growing, that learning, that growth that you have, that acceleration, and even maybe leadership style, depending on what people are doing. So yeah, I feel like you were talking about me. So I'm gonna get this video out this week. It was on my calendar to do. So when you all see it, I'm gonna be like, listen, Harold made me.
Well, what's the saying? Strong beliefs loosely held, right? So you can have thoughts, you can have beliefs, you can have positions, and be open to having them tested. I mean, I have a good friend who she and I will talk about hey, we can just argue and from our debating points, and after that, just cut up because we appreciate the aspect of understanding one person's perspective, how they arrived at it. When I tie it back to business, one of the things that I would do to encourage people to show up and share their opinions and thoughts, I always spoke last in my business meetings. As CEO, I encouraged everyone to talk before me. We had Black women, we had a trans man, we had all these different folks from different perspectives and different walks of life. And so I think about that in the same way that my job as a CEO is to set the destination and the vision. So what does that look like? I say, hey, y'all, we are going to have lunch at 1 p.m. at this restaurant. I've said where we're going and the vision. This is the type of place we're going to, destination, timeline, all of that. I didn't say, hey, I want you to take I-85 and you're going to take this exit and this and this and this. No, I said, this is where we're going. This is the time. So if one person decides to jog there and another person decides to bike there, another person decides to take a helicopter there, I don't care how you get there. But then once we get there, the person who jogged says, hey, I was jogging and I was thinking about this thing. I just saw the thing in the forest and it made me think about this. And then the person who's at the helicopter is like, honestly, from overhead, this actually looks like this, and it inspired me to do this. All that is looking at people's perspectives and having them bring their whole selves and experiences to problems and all of that. And so for me, that was super intentional to make sure, we're getting a unique and diverse perspective that is necessary for us to build something that's world changing and for everyone. So I think about that a good bit.
No, I love it. And I love the kind of the switch over to leadership. So as you were leading these teams, do you feel like it was different? How you led teams in your entrepreneurial world versus how you might have led teams when you were in the corporate setting, and kind of what was that like within that team dynamic? Did you feel more free and open to really lead and also to learn in different settings?
For sure. I think that in corporate America, there's almost a reliance on hierarchy. And like, this idea is right inherently because the VP says it, or this idea can't be great because the intern says it. And as a person who challenged authority at a very young age, I don't really work well in those environments. I knew when I was in corporate America,
You're
like,
in good company.
yeah, it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so I knew in corporate America, I was like, I can't do this. If I had a chance to do this, I would change everything. And that was where I had, when I received my MBA, that was, went back to school and got my MBA in the evenings. And I said, man, this is my first time thinking about what it would be like if I set the rules. And what would I do? I was like, well, I want to prioritize everyone's opinion. I remember seeing some different, there was a company, I think it's called Balloon with the letter R at the end. I believe that was the name of the company, but the concept was like, normally ideas work in that corporate hierarchical way where the CEO says it, so it's a great idea, and the janitor says it's a terrible idea. And so you could submit different ideas or responses to a query or to a problem or to a challenge. And then once the group evaluated it all, you could decide to, in an anonymous way, you could submit all that. And then once it's decided, like, oh, we're going to go this direction, you could say, I'm going to take my anonymity off this and show my name. It's like, oh my gosh, this was so-and-so's idea, where you get into some meritocracy, where you get into the credits being necessary. And so I loved that company. And I remember meeting the founder when we were filming something for Meet the Drapers, a TV show we did. And I was like, this is so cool. It makes so much sense. And so for me, knowing the challenges that exist, you stifle a lot of innovation. You stifle a lot of people. And so you have to be intentional about asking people to speak up. And so, the thing I tell friends, I tell mentees, I tell all these folks, especially the Black women that I talk to, is that your voice is necessary and needed in any room that you go into. It was missing before you got there, and it deserves to be there. And so for those of us who go into these rooms and feel like small, or maybe I'm not good enough, it's just like, no, we deserve to be in here. And you've heard Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, and all these different people say, like, yeah, these folks aren't all that smart or aren't that smarter than us. All of that is true. And so I'm just trying to stand more in that, confidently saying, from a leadership standpoint, I need to have your idea. There's no way that the one thing I know for certain is that I probably don't have this all figured out. That's why I had to hire all of you. Please tell me your perspective. And so collaboration is a key part of my leadership style.
No, I love it. I mean, I feel like it's the only way to learn, and that's the only way to build innovation is from everyone. Because to your point about, the person that jogged, and the person who's coming in the helicopter, and the person who, maybe took the car over, everyone is going to have something that they saw on that same journey that's going to spark some sort of idea that could have been prompted by the biker. And then the helicopter person jumps in, and then the driver's like, oh, well, did you think about it this way? And then from there, here's something that's been born because of those differences of, sight and visual, but have come together to build something that is collectively beautiful and engaging and innovative and smart, right? Yep. Something that you can kind of really start to see tangible effort out of, and then you're continuing to scale your company. So in this moment, obviously there's, a lot going on in a lot of different ways, but especially for a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, business owners, no matter what size your company is. What advice do you have for them as they start to kind of maybe leverage various decisions, even in their personal and founder journey, of what they need to do as they're looking at, access to potential capital, or they're, looking to just make payroll or pay their own bills. And, I feel like there's a lot more thought around certain things, especially as this wealth journey continues for a lot of founders, and how we start to navigate that in the economic space of reality that we're looking at. What is some advice that you have for founders as they're navigating all the different parts of stuff that's going on?
Yeah, as a founder, I love that journey where most of my net worth was tied up into a venture-backed company where it's like, oh, it's worth all this money, and so you're therefore a multimillionaire in all these different ways. And I remembered having friends who would not angel invest, and it's like, no, I'm putting all my focus here. It's just like, okay, so do you have a savings account? Do you have a 401k? Do you have an IRA? And it's like, yeah, of course I have an IRA. Of course I have a savings account. It's like, okay, so why would you not invest in companies? Do you buy stock? Well, yeah, I buy stock. Well, why would you not continue to balance this? And so I encourage more entrepreneurs to try and lean into being a multi hyphenate, in that being, yes, you're an entrepreneur, but this can't define you and it won't. Right. And I dealt with a lot of challenges with depression and, am I a failure when the company failed? Right. But you have to acknowledge, and one of the things I've been able to take away from this is there were successes in the failure. There were things we learned, there were things we excelled at, there were things we achieved. And so, how do you take those things and continue to bring them forward? And so, I encourage people to say, hey, listen, like, don't make all of your eggs in that basket financially. That's a step one. The second thing is, I'd say that be mindful of how you communicate with investors, potential investors, peers in the space, because you would be surprised by how people will use that and interact with you afterwards. As I said, I shut my company down, and one of my mentors and advisors reached out to me like a week ago, and it's like, "Hey, I'm writing a book. Would you be okay with me listing you and Bandwagon as a reference, as a client, a reference?" And I said, we shut that company down, right? Like, why would you want in any way to be associated with it? And he ended up complimenting me on my leadership style, how I was able to contribute, and the things we built, and all that. And I was thankful. Like, here I was. This man wrote me a check for thousands of dollars, and I lost his money. And he's reaching out to me, asking if he can use me as a reference as he's doing this thing. I was blown away, and that was just an example of how you treat people matters more than a lot of other things. And so I think that is the second piece. And then the third thing I'll say is being sure that as you're thinking through the entrepreneur journey, these are long-term relationships. And so if an investor tells you no, it's not that they hate you or they don't like you, but the landscape is so competitive now. And so there are more no's than yeses. And so I think that it's important to make sure you're talking to humans and thinking about how you build a capital safe business that you can bootstrap or fund yourself, or maybe you've got some initial paying clients that can help you get there. So that to me has always been huge. Is really, I think we missed we will miss those days of like 2021 and people raising bunches of money without much. Like, I think now you need to have a bit stronger of a business case, and we're seeing more of that in our accelerator with Catalyst Labs, an organization I helped co-found. Like, we're seeing those types of companies say, hey, these are great, but here are the things you need to get to that next step.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important to really like set that foundation and try to separate your identity from the identity of the business. Because then you're just making, different decisions or even better decisions because you don't feel like, oh, this is all of who I am, right? And you're able to kind of step away and say, wow, I really did some cool shit. And a lot of people think I did that.
And it's challenging. It's challenging as hell, because
Mhm.
now you have to be a CEO and an influencer.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's nuts. Like, you gotta be good at what you do, and then also be able to like beat your chest and say, I did this. We're the
Mhm.
best in this space. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm just demonstrating and sharing like how it is working and has worked for me and how I see it working for others. It's tough to do it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a whole thing. It's like, yeah, do this, and then it's like that constant freeze of the photo
Yes.
or the video, and now I got
Setting
to
the
figure out,
camera up.
yeah, chop it up. We got to use AI. We got to do all these things, and thank God we have all these other resources and tools.
It's nuts.
Yeah, but before we close out, I would love to know at this moment, like, what brings you financial joy,
What brings me financial joy? What is financial joy? I think that's a
or even what that
oxymoron.
means to you.
I
I
would
feel
say
like a
financial
lot of
joy feels
times
like
we
an
don't.
oxymoron. But here's the thing, I think I'll say it's what it inspired. Um, I don't like buy things very often for myself, but I would spend a lot of money on food. And so this year, instead of doing like a couple of resolutions or a couple of goals, my sister inspired me to do a bingo card like full of goals. So a bunch of like
Oh,
smaller.
you
I
did it
don't.
too? This is
Oh,
awesome. Yes, because
yeah.
my group chat, we actually just had a conversation this weekend about what happened to everyone's bingo goals.
I was gonna ask you, like, a lot of people haven't looked at them, and so I looked at my Bing goals or whatever at the end of March, or I guess beginning of April. I was like, okay, here's some that I checked off. Fantastic. One of my goals was a 52-week Peloton streak. Well, I blew that in like February. So it's like, all right, that one's not happening. Do I replace it? No, it's okay. I can have a bit of misses here, but I love to spend time with friends and family on experiences, and normally that is around food. And so I guess from a financial joy standpoint, is going places and not worrying about how much things cost. So I have a good friend of mine in Atlanta, and she and I are notorious for getting 3 entrees. Like, that's just what we do. Like, it doesn't even matter if we're eating together. It's like, oh, I want this one. I want this one. This is great. I've got a homeboy in Austin, and he's not big on drinking, but me and him can put food away. And so I'm like, hey, bro, don't even worry about it. I got it. I got this contract, like, and we'll have a time. So for me, financial joy is being able to spend time and create experiences with people normally around food, with loved ones and friends. And so that's been pretty good to see that happen. And so with my bingo goals, I basically said with every goal that I hit, I'm going to have a meal with someone. And so I have people who have suggested some places. I'm going to go check out some of those. So this week, I'm going to try and see if I can hit Dogon, I think, in DC with Chef Kwame. So it's been hard to get a table. We're going to see if I can pull it off.
Ooh, ooh. Well, please share. And if
I
you have a
will.
list, if you start to post lists of these restaurants you're going to, add me to that mailing list.
Yeah. I love to cook, though. I tell people all the time, a man's place is in the kitchen. I made a bomb seafood pasta dish for Mother's Day. And so I love to cook. I love to feed people. And so whether it's friends coming over for the grill and me smoking out some ribs and chicken and making some Jamaican food. So all of that, I think financial joy comes down to like having the money to provide these, meals and experiences with friends and loved ones.
I love it. It's dope. And it also ties back into like everything we just kind of talked about, right? That social capital, that being together, the building those genuine and real relationships and letting everyone kind of pour into each other in the most amazing, amazing way. So
Yeah.
I'm loving that you're doing all of these experiences when I'm in the Queen City, because I do come there with, and visiting my friends. Listen,
Pull up.
I am definitely gonna pull up and be
Pull
like,
up.
what's on the menu?
I got you. I got you. The stove's always hot. I got some chicken thawing right now. I'm gonna curry up some chicken, some coconut rice, the whole thing tonight.
Man, listen, see, everybody on a podcast is like, they making notes. They making notes.
There you go.
Well, Harold, I appreciate you coming on and dropping so many gems. I think this was an amazing conversation and a lot to just think about, and a lot of the ways that we just not only think about money, but really spend time thinking about people. And I feel like somehow along the way, we've forgotten that everyone is human and they have their own thoughts and ideas and opinions and realness to them. So I love the fact that we spent a lot of time just talking about how to interact with people,
Yeah.
how to champion people, and also, how to champion yourself and not forgetting about yourself too. So I hope a lot of people took that away.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think about social capital being so important that, even as I branded the company as infinite, it's infinite without the eyes, because I want to focus on less I and more we. And I'm very cognizant that there are rooms that I'm in that money couldn't have got me into. It had to be the relationship of someone, the good word of someone, or someone speaking my name in somewhere to say Harold should be in here. And so not only do I try to pay that forward and do it for the folks I think should be in those spaces, but I also want to make sure everyone recognizes that chasing relationships is probably going to be a better yield when it comes to money, because it's going to get you into rooms you can't get in with just cash.
I could not agree more. And I'm gonna just drop it there. We're gonna sprinkle all the good stuff on it. So Harold, again, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. I'm sure we're gonna have you back on the podcast. And for all those that are listening, definitely make sure you check out this episode and catch up on all the other episodes of the Equity Blueprint podcast. And until next time, have a wonderful evening, and make sure that you're train your brain to be about collaboration and social capital.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you heard, make sure you share and subscribe. Tell a friend to check it out as well. See you again soon.